another reason for that, and another reason why it's been a less than golden year right now in boxing is because of the reoccurrence of PEDs in the sport. Are there any set answers you feel to tackle what is a problem that seems to be a growing problem in the sport right now?
Yeah, there's one credible PED testing organization in the world today, and that's VADA. VADA tests the fighters thoroughly. It reports the results to all of the relevant parties, including the governing athletic commission. And if you are seriously interested in dealing with the PED scourge in boxing, you do testing with VADA, not USADA, which, and I wrote about this in the past. There was USADA, when they were testing professional boxers, tested 1,501 fighters for PEDs, and they reported one positive result, one out of more than 1,500, to a governing state athletic commission. And that was after somebody leaked the results on a website. They were adjudicating themselves, as they said, which one might call covering up. Drug-free sport isn't the answer. You can make a deal with drug-free sport where drug-free sport reports the results to whoever pays for it. And then it's up to that person, whether it's the promoter of the fight or somebody else, to decide it.
Just picking that back up with where we had some technical gremlins stopping the flow of the conversation, but you were saying regarding drug-free sport not being the answer and VADA being the answer.
Yeah, they're in the first place, drug-free sport doesn't test for nearly as many things as VADA tests. There was some attention paid recently to a positive test that Alicia Baumgartner had with drug-free sport. My understanding, and you can check with drug-free sport on this, but I'm pretty certain this is right, is that she tested positive for a banned performance-enhancing drug, but drug-free sport didn't even test for EPO or human growth hormone on that panel. Well, that's a pretty serious omission. And then, of course, they reported it to Eddie Hearn because Eddie paid for the tests. Now, in this instance, Eddie chose to report the positive results to the appropriate parties. I don't know that Eddie would have made the same decision if it had been Conor Benn testing positive right before the Chris Eubanks fight. It's quite possible that under those circumstances, Eddie would have gone to Conor and said, what is this? And Conor would have said, Eddie, I swear to you, I'm a clean fighter. And Eddie could have said, well, I know Conor well. I look deep into his eyes and I believe him. That's hypothetical, but it wouldn't have shocked me if something like that would have unfolded at some point in the future. Any reporting of let's start with drug testing in boxing for performance enhancing drugs. First, you have to do the appropriate testing. And that means testing for the, drugs, the way VADA does, not just the drugs VADA tests for, but also using carbon isotope ratio testing. And does it cost more money to do it right? Yeah, everything does. So first you have to test properly. Then you have to report the results to the proper parties. And at the very least, that should be both fighters, their camps, and the governing state athletic commission.
Does this come down to overall an issue with costs when it comes to drugs and drug testing?
Cost is part of the issue, but it also is an issue of integrity and will and understanding that we're not talking about running faster or hitting a baseball further. We're talking about punching people in the head harder. And, you spend the money. Now, I think you have to apportion the money. Can you do full testing, 365 days a year for every fighter in a promoter's stable? No, absolutely not. What you can do is have random testing for all fighters, which actually the WBC has now through its clean boxing program. If you're ranked in the top 15 in any weight division, you're subject to spot testing. And then obviously you would test more frequently, for elite fighters, for world champions, for fighters who have major bouts coming up. That's how you bring it within the realm of being cost efficient. Look, I would like to see networks because, if you look at really where the power resides in boxing, promoters are only as good as their TV contracts. I would like to see DAZN, ESPN, Showtime, you know, TNT, is that what BT is now in the
Yeah.
UK? All the big networks, say Sky Sport, say we will not televise fights unless the fighters subject themselves to random VADA drug testing. Now, the truth is, networks won't do that because they're afraid that certain fighters who might not be clean then will gravitate to other networks. Promoters will be reluctant to do it because they might lose some of their fighters. But look, the fighters, at the end of the day, the fighters have to take the lead on this because they're the ones who are getting hit in the head. And too few of them do.
What would you say is a suitable reflection of punishment when it comes to fighters who are proven to have taken performance-enhancing substances? It seems that, look, it does vary from case to case because each case is individual, but it doesn't seem that we are getting the bans that an integral sport, to keep its integrity, should be dealing out in these circumstances.
It varies, as you suggested, based on the circumstances. First, if a fighter says, yes, this was in my system, I take full responsibility for it, I'm not going to fight it, that to me weighs in favor of leniency. That's what happened with Canelo Alvarez when there was clenbuterol in his system. And it legitimately could have come from tainted beef under the circumstances. Canelo was as tested as any fighter ever in the history of boxing. Canelo took responsibility for it. He said it was in my system. He got a 6-month punishment. To me, that sounded reasonable. I would say a minimum of 2 years and maybe more.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it also depends on the severity of the drug.
Mm-hmm. Thomas, very cognizant that I've taken up a lot more of your time, and there's a lot on the table that I could be asking you. However, I'd like to leave that for another day, another time to speak to you. So thank you for speaking to me and Seconds Out. I'll just leave one final question to yourself. Do you have a recommendation of any books to read in terms of boxing for someone who'd like to, yes, like to know more about the sport?
Well, of course, I'm partial to my own. And each year, the University of Arkansas Press brings out a collection of all the articles I wrote the year before. And the new book, which just came back from the printer, is called The Universal Sport. That actually has all the articles I wrote about boxing in 2021 and 2022. So I would say The Universal Sport is the most current. There's obviously, the Big Ali biography, Muhammad Ali, His Life and Times, which goes back a ways. But from my point of view, the boxing anthologies, and all of these are available online from sites like Amazon.com and abooks.com. They're available in ebook form as well as print form. If you go, or you can go to the University of Arkansas Press website, which actually is, you get a discount if you go to the University of Arkansas Press website. Those collections of articles really chronicle the contemporary boxing scene year after year after year. And that might be a good place to start. That and Muhammad Ali His Life and Times.
Thomas, you'll have my word that I'll read each of those books as your suggestions. I have one rule that I don't start a book until I've finished another one. I'm currently reading through Tris Dixon's Damage, apropos of this interview.
I will say Tris Dixon's book Damage is a wonderful, wonderful book. I'm a Tris Dixon fan. And to me, anybody who is involved in boxing certainly is a ring doctor working for a commission, a manager, a fighter, anybody who cares about the welfare of the fighter should read Damage. It is a first-rate book.
Thomas, a real pleasure. Thank you for speaking to Seconds Out, and we'll speak again soon, hopefully.